Welcome, everyone, to Coffee Chat Podcast, investment banking recruiting podcast presented by OFFERGOBLIN. I'm Mike Neal. This is Ryan Tan, the unflappable Ryan Tan. And we've got all that you need to know to get into investment banking. You'll follow along each week with us. We'll take you all the way through. The topic this week is about split recruiting, which we don't recommend doing, parallel recruiting. We'll talk more about that. But before we get into that, we want to get an update on the street from Ryan. Ryan, what is going on Wall Street right now, recruitment-wise? What have you been doing?
Thanks, Mike. Well, the street, everyone's hitting their training. All the summer analysts right now are just went through training, either just wrapped up this week, and they're about to hit the desk on Monday. So, for those of you interning, you probably, depending on which bank you're at, you may have had me training you this summer, and you're ready to get rock and rolling. So that's mainly what's going on. The full timers don't hit the desk for another week or two in terms of their training. Their training is going to be a bit longer. It will vary by bank. So some banks start their training in August, other banks start their training in July. So yeah, you guys are going through training, and then some folks are even prepping for lateraling. So, but that's another story.
That's playing to win. So
Yeah.
all the summer associates are starting training this next week. I've been on some phone calls with people who are getting started training. What's the vibe? How are they? How are you? What are you sensing about these? Do they seem nervous? Do they feel like confident in getting return offers? What's the feeling that you're getting from being around these folks?
So I think there's a few buckets, right? I also work with a lot of students one-on-one, right?
Hmm.
The students I one-on-one, they're a bit anxious, right? The students I work on one might be a bit, let's say they're on an individual level. I think folks are nervous about offer rates getting back and be up to speed. I think
Hmm.
on a class level in general, that may be a bit different story because it's a very different viewpoint when I'm training folks on that end. I think they're very excited about training.
Hmm.
This week I trained the folks in Excel. I think that's one of our, I think usually we get the best feedback because nobody's taught Excel in college or
Hmm.
in business school. So when you teach them how to use Excel without a mouse and all hotkeys, and we train them usually for a full day for that,
Hmm.
the feedback's really, really good. So
And what's your number one Excel tip if you had to give one?
I will say that it's one of those things that comes with practice, right? I tell
Mm.
we show them all the hotkeys, we show them all the shortcuts, we show them all the formulas. It's like going to the gym. It's a muscle you have to practice. So we give them the most commonly used hotkeys, and we tell them to just paste it next to their computers or on their
Yeah.
cubicles and make it a initiative saying, look, I'm not going to use my mouse. And
Hmm.
I think this is where it takes a lot of just self-discipline. You have two types of people. One who make it proactively say, hey, I'm not going to use a mouse. I'm going to use a shortcut or the hotkeys. And if I'm stuck and I don't know it, I'm going to look at my quick hotkeys, right? Or they'll
Hmm.
review the Excel that we've gone through them with and they'll practice it. Or if they
Yeah.
get to a part and they don't know, they'll be like, aha, wait a minute. I may have done this, written a formula before like this through our training sessions.
Hmm.
Let's review. I think those are generally the students that will having the mindset of saying, I want to get better and good at
Yeah.
it will also carry over to just everything in life and in work, right? Whereas I've seen other people who just like kind of says, oh, this is great and all, but I'm going to be resistant to it. Those are usually the kids who also don't get return offers. So
Right.
it's correlated. It's not causation,
Hmm.
but there's usually correlation between the two.
Yeah. I had a call this week with someone who's starting at a boutique, and they were asking about kind of what to look out for in return offers and like how much networking they should do and how sort of like how formal they should be. That was kind of the general vibe because I think some banks give a sort of a hint that they're not, as formal as others, or they're like, oh, we don't care about that. It's a no asshole policy, all that sort of thing. And my general advice is like, don't don't believe that. Don't like just
Yeah.
treat banking as if you're in the 90s at Lehman or something, right? Like um don't take their friendliness as a means of being informal because a lot of times people won't stop you from making those mistakes, but when it comes time to bringing people back, um, that'll harm you. That will
Yeah.
like not shield you well. So a lot of it, I think, be conservative despite what the firm may officially say. A lot of times they'll also say things like, "Oh, all of you have a return offer in this sort of training." Don't believe that either. Everyone is still fighting for a return offer. I would not get complacent. That would be my advice to you. Um, so, yeah, let's talk a little bit about your week,
Hmm.
because you had a long week in Florida.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the highs and lows of that.
So I actually had, yes, it was a long week since I just flew back in from Asia. So that itself was, I flew on Monday Asia time, so that was Sunday US time. And then I flew from
Hmm.
Shanghai to Seoul, and then from Seoul to San Francisco. Then
Hmm.
stayed on the ground for a few hours, and then took the red eye from San Francisco to Orlando, but that's not a straight flight. So flew to Atlanta, then laid over in Atlanta, then got into Orlando.
Man.
And so we're training. Yeah, it's been a lot of travel, and then
Mm,
and then you have to adjust for all the time zone changes. And
mm,
then this week we were training Wells at Disney World. So Wells is awesome. So for those of you who don't know, I personally started off my career at Wells Fargo. We did
mm.
not get to go to Disney World when I was at Wells. I wish we had.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
there A to A, so even when I got promoted to associate, I still didn't get to go to Disney World. So I was
yeah,
telling the folks, I'm like, Wells is really the place to be, and we train a lot of different banks, and and I talked to a lot of different kids, right? They're at different
yeah.
banks, and they're all
Hmm.
very jealous of the Wells kids because they will
Hmm.
stick you at the Disney hotels. And then after
Hmm.
training, they'll let you go to Epcot, they'll let you go to Hollywood Studios, and they
Yeah.
wine and dine you. They literally you have dinner at the nice ballrooms. It's catering, it's fancy food.
Mm.
So the Wells kids are having a lot of fun. So we train them during the day, and then at night they go have fun at Disney World. So
Wow. I personally would not enjoy that. Maybe I'm like there's something wrong with me, but things that are set up in order to be fun, I never like them. Like I always like I would rather us go on like a mountain retreat and like go hiking every day than like go to Disneyland. And that's kind of my like I I have some feeling about those
yeah,
sorts of things also where it's like I whenever I feel like I'm a consumer, whenever I
yeah,
really get that feeling like oh I'm like it's like I'm feeling like infantilized, I guess would be the word. It's like I feel like it's like someone's like dangling like keys in front of me and
yeah,
like distracting me. And I think that's also one of the reasons that I was able to like leave banking is that I'm not very impressed by those types of things, but
yeah,
I'm happy that all of them got to kind of go on this like vacation because I think it's
yeah,
fun that they all get to like leave where they come from and like sort of
yeah,
come all into one place and sort of be
yeah.
isolated together. I think there's a lot of bonding, I'm sure that happens there. So was it brutal? I mean, you're up late working on the next day's materials. I mean you were already came in burned, so how was it? I mean,
Well, so a few things on just to, before I answer your question. So I'd say Wells does it really nicely in that they bring in not only the investment banking team, but they bring in
mm,
their entire summer analysts. Like think
mm,
markets, think real estate, think corporate finance, corporate banking.
mm,
So it allows folks to really get to network and know each other. But I will also say, remember, like I know you prefer hiking, Mike, but these are 19, 20-year-olds. So
Yeah.
they're not as mature as you, right? They want the key dangling. They want to be wined and dined.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, but in terms on my end, I'd say yeah, we do a lot of prep work behind the scenes. So
Hmm.
we try to make things as like I think having been an analyst, having gone through banking myself and remembering what it was like not knowing anything is very helpful for preparation.
Yeah,
So
totally.
there's a lot of prep work behind the scenes, making sure the timing of how do we present something. We go
Hmm.
step by step. So the goal is to, right, make it as intuitive as possible. So, I mean, yes, it takes time, but it's also a lot of fun, especially when we get the feedback back.
Yeah.
Feedback was very positive. I read every single course review that kids leave us. So,
Hmm.
I mean, it's a bit funny. It's like a bunch of 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds telling you that you're the GOAT. I'm like, I don't know if I'm the GOAT, but I'm glad you enjoyed the session. So,
You're goated, man.
I am not
Just
GOATed.
accept it. I think you're probably the worst at accepting compliments of anyone that I know, Ryan. Which is in some ways endearing, and in some ways I'm like, Ryan. But you're very good at what you do. I think it's very clear to anyone that works with you. Obviously, I know you well as well, and I think you're always underselling yourself, which is your charm, perhaps. On my end, well, one other thing about Wells Fargo, I think Wells Fargo is a bank that is on the rise in terms
Yeah,
of prestige, deal volume. They're actually doing really, really well. I think
yeah,
historically people have thought of them as sort of like, I mean, they're obviously a large bulge bracket bank. I think people discounted them historically in terms
yeah,
of recruiting and prestige and all of that.
yeah,
I think that's going to change. I think that is changing.
yeah,
So I think that's one to watch.
yeah,
In other words, I think it's undervalued. If you're in the recruitment process, you can look at Wells as a viable option that probably a lot
yeah,
of other candidates are going to overlook. So
yeah.
take that with a grain of salt. On my end, I am up in, you talk about how 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds don't like hiking or 18-year-olds. I am in northern Minnesota. I am guiding wilderness trips, which is sort of similar to
Nice.
what I do in investment banking. And I lead kids basically on hikes and canoe trips as well. So, ironically, there is a lot of people that do like this sort of torment that comes with being outside. Um, I think it's been a really intense week for me setting up things around here because I just got up here like last week. Um, Another sort of hard thing for me, I think, is like there's a feeling I know that the French probably have a word for this, but
Hmm.
it's like seeing a different path that you could have taken. So like all of my friends are graduating from their MBA program. I
Yeah.
dropped out. All of them are starting these new like banking jobs, uh, and it's kind of like looking like, oh, that was the path that I was
Hmm.
on. And I'm on this like really crazy journey, and Ryan's a part of it, Chang, Jackson, some other members on our team, and all these other people that have kind of come along the way, and you guys watching this, subscribers to Offer Goblin, people that I've worked with in coaching, and it's like such a crazy journey that I think one day, some days it's like,
Hmm.
wow, I can't believe that I am not following that, cushy path and the keys dangling, what I would say is the hot tub, uh, versus, oh, it says Ryan Tan's device is struggling. It's too much for
Yeah,
you, it
this is the
says.
first time I've seen this before.
Um,
Well,
so
hopefully we'll.
I will say, hmm?
It says my
I'll
processing
keep.
power is being strained. Well, let's keep going. Let's keep going. I'm going to close as many
This
applications
is
as I can.
so if for the viewers of the podcast, it's going to, I think we'll probably never escape technology issues.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, ex machina, the computers are coming to get us. And finishing what I was saying, the journey of going into entrepreneurship, there's a lot of highs and lows. A lot of people that I talk to, whether they're going into banking or doing an MBA or something else, everyone has this idea in mind that they'll do this thing. And I wouldn't say, I can't say that you shouldn't do it. I think it's really cool, but the highs are high and the lows are low. There's no guardrails on what I'm doing. And so sometimes it's like, wow, I'm really out here in the wilderness. And I literally am out here in the wilderness. So on a Starlink connection. So that's my end. And we'll get into the topic this week. So we're talking about basically committing to investment banking recruitment, doing parallel tracks. We had a prior episode where we kind of talk about different tracks that people can take. But I want to focus more on this topic because the people who are coming in now into this new season, they should be kind of thinking around this time whether they're going to go for it or not. And keeping your options open is oftentimes really not a viable track to take. That's something from I always liked about the book 0 to 1, which is Peter Thiel's book. He talks about how people really orient on optionality. Because they do that, what ends up happening is they don't commit to one path, and the paths that are difficult, they can't climb because they're kind of keeping all of these options open. So I would say that the banking recruitment process is a full-time job. I think if you're able to juggle multiple full-time jobs, okay, but the sense is that you will commit a lot of time to this. I think we can talk about like what a day in the life of someone recruiting for investment banking is and those sorts of things in later on in the episode. But those are the sorts of things that we're going to talk about. So let's start with just kind of, I guess, an easy question. Is it possible, or how much commitment, how competitive is it, how casual is it to recruit for investment banking, Ryan? What do people need to commit to this? What do they need to sacrifice? What changes?
So I like to think of it as recruiting for investment banking in itself is a very good weeder to see if you are fit for investment banking. Right? It is a marathon. Right? You literally have to eat, breathe, sleep finance to do well. It encompasses all sorts of facets from like networking to technicals to behavioral to coffee chats and all that. And even if you don't get into banking, I think that in itself is a really good boot camp, right? To be consistent, like waking up every day, making you send out your networking emails, or constantly refining your stories, knowing how to present yourself when talking with somebody. Also learning your technicals, as well as keeping on up to date with market news and following the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times and having a viewpoint. And then going further in terms of like, how do you deliver information? Can you deliver information succinctly? Is there a takeaway message, right? I think those are all good training skills in general. And it's not something you just turn it on, right? It's something that you kind of have to do it over the course of months. You wake up every day, you keep pushing at it, and the result's not guaranteed. It's the market has gotten so competitive that it really just takes a devotion to the cause, right? And and it builds a lot of character. I think that's the one thing I used to joke about a lot when I was in banking, when the life sucked. I just look in the mirror and be like, it builds character, man. Just keep chugging.
Yeah. I guess it's a question of whether you want to be that character sometimes, but I know what you mean. And I think I would agree that I think it is very competitive. And there's many facets to it. And a lot of times the process itself and the way that they're interviewing you, they're trying to see if you're parallel recruiting. Because that in itself is an indication to them that you're not totally committed. One of the things that I coach people on, and I'm sure Ryan would agree, is that when you answer, let's say, your story or your why banking or these sort of like boilerplate questions, everything needs to indicate that you're uniquely targeting investment banking. if your why banking, for example, which we talked a bit about in the last episode, could apply to other fields, that's kind of indicative that you're not really all in. And if you're literally not all in, like if you're literally doing parallel tracks while you're recruiting, you're in trouble. I mean, they're gonna try to suss that out, right? They want the hardcore, committed finance people. Um, that said, also logistically, it would just be very difficult to parallel recruit. One thing that I'll highlight though is that if you're talking about like as an analyst, so as an undergrad, the timeline makes it possible that you can basically do multiple paths because, which you shouldn't do up until, let's say, you basically get your banking offer. So your first year, you maybe do some kind of internship during school. You maybe do something finance related over the summer, ideally that kind of plays to your story that you're committed. You get an offer like first semester, first quarter, second quarter, sophomore year. And then after that, you have a little bit of leeway if you were to do, because you have a sort of summer in between, if you were to do something totally different, let's say tech, you have a little bit of optionality there. Whereas on the MBA side, you have one summer. So if you're going to parallel recruit, you kind of need to do all of that at the same time, which is very, very difficult. Um, I do know, well, I'm curious, Ryan, if you know anyone who has done multiple at once or candidates that you've talked to who have done multiple at once and been successful in any of those areas.
So I will say that there is a timing split, right? And we're talking undergrads. We're not talking MBA associates, right? So usually you are done by, let's say, January of your sophomore year, right? So this is second semester, right? And then you have a few months, right? And depending on how you stagger it, because banking recruits so early, you are interviewing your sophomore year for the summer before your senior year. I have then people then parallel switch, right? So I get my banking offer, right? Now I have, in theory, a year and a half to recruit for something else, assuming the timeline lines. And then consulting, if I remember correctly, consulting is a bit later than banking. So consulting is not like 2 years ahead in terms of recruiting. So I've seen people who like, and this is, I don't know if it's still the case now because tech got hammered hard, but I see people who are like a dual computer science and business major where they might recruit for product management or some folks might recruit for consulting, but usually they recruit for consulting after they struck out in banking. So I guess more pride to bankers where people like to sneer at consultants, right? There's this ongoing battle between who's better, consulting or banking. I think if I were to throw my hat in, I'd say probably banking is winning that battle right now, especially with the whole AI wars where people say it's much easier to AI away consulting than it is to banking. So I digress. But I have seen people where after they get their offer, then they go in on something else, right? They might go in and try to do a startup and maybe try to get Y Combinator, or they might go product management. And I also tell folks to do that. I'm like, you have a great backup now, right? Like use this time to explore because the thing with banking is you kind of almost start recruiting once you get to college, right? You have those finance clubs and you have to get an internship. So I've seen it staggered, but I've not seen people do it at the same time. And the people who do it at the same time I've not seen a success story, right? Usually you end up getting nothing if you try to recruit both at the same time.
Yeah, I do. I do think that's the timeline of recruitment is a very important feature. And that kind of ties to something you said earlier about how the process itself builds character and skill. So for MBAs and undergrads, the recruiting process for banking is probably among the earliest that you'll run into. So, I mean, the banks would love to call you when you're in high school if they could, if they knew who the top people were. They love to do that. I did a stream which we're going to upload onto YouTube about the MBA process and to talk about how the banks really are in this race to capture the best talent. And part of that is they're always going to try to go earlier and earlier and earlier. The advantage that you have in doing that, if you're, let's say, a freshman right now, or you're coming into an MBA, is like if you just shoot your shot and you do it well, even if you don't get something, you've probably developed a lot of very solid transferable skills. So I'll give an example of that. So I went through the whole process, right? I interned at Centerview, got to the very end, and decided I didn't want to go into banking. So I started to reach out to people in tech. I was able to get on the phone with people from Palantir and SpaceX and all these other Anduril, cool companies that I just found interesting, which are in the tech space. And using the sort of coffee chat setup kind of conversation style that I learned through banking and became very polished about, it was very easy for me to get into those conversations and essentially tee up interviews. So people in other fields don't really have that skill as well. So the market isn't as saturated. So I also, I have the attitude when I pursue something is like, if I go through with this and I do all the things that are required of me, if it fails, let's say by some means that's beyond my control, will I be left off in a better state than when I began? I think the banking recruitment process is definitely one of those journeys based on both the timeline, the skills, and then also just the chance that like, yeah, you could just, you could get an offer and basically be done. Plus, of course, outside of just looking at it as like a career path on its own. So let's talk a little about like the actual like day to day, maybe we could almost go month to month, but like the recruitment process ahead, right? We're in June. We're recording this on June 6th. So what is it going to look like? Like, let's go month over month. What's the rest of June look like for someone who is going into banking? Maybe you can talk about the undergrad side of that, and I'll kind of layer in the MBA. So let's talk about June. What's happening in June for undergrads, freshmen?
I'm assuming you're talking about rising sophomores, right? Not people going into.
Yeah.
So I will say this: there's two types, right? You have the one type who hasn't figured out what they want to do in life, and then they start in August, and then there's a desperate scramble, right? Or maybe in October, then it's a real big scramble. The people who do it smart, and I always think of even starting now, you're like, ideally I have you start in like your freshman year. And when I say freshman year, like your first semester freshman year. Because you usually want some sort of relevant finance internship. Ideally, you have like a boutique investment banking internship this summer. But what I recommend is like, I always like to think of margins of safety. So
Yeah.
ideally, if you're a freshman right now or a rising sophomore, is that you already have a relevant finance internship. It could be at VC, PE, a boutique investment bank, corporate strategy, strategic finance, something or like even equity research at like a smaller shop. You're not going to get it at a bigger shop. And just having that, strongly signals that, hey, you're serious about finance, right? Then at the same time, I would already start networking. On the freshman side, it's so much easier to network if you're already in your clubs because that's where all the relationships are going to be in, and there's a lot of in-school recruiting. But hey, if you're not in the clubs, then start reaching out now. That's going to be much, much harder, exponentially harder, simply because so many people are like, you're kind of going it out of the structured recruiting process, and so many kids are desperate to reach out. But earlier is always better, right? I like to think of it, you want at least 2-3 touches. So if you could get connected now before it's a bit cold, it's a bit like a colder season for recruiting right now because the folks have gotten their offers, they're starting out the desk, there's not as much deal flow during the summer, so it's a bit slower. And get that touch in, get your face in, talk to people, and then, when you hit them up again during fall, it's going to be so much easier to get them to respond to you and then follow up and give you a referral. But
Yeah.
do your initial networking now. And then also now is just knock out your technicals, learn everything now so that you're less stressed. You can focus on when fall comes where the banks show up at the recruiting events. You could,
Yeah.
I would also make it a habit is start reading the Wall Street Journal daily, start following the markets daily, start following the deals, have your industry knowledge, have your specific companies so that you actually know what you're talking about when the banks show up, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
start early, as always, start early, 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 early.
Yeah. I think that's the general principle. I'll talk about the MBA side of that. The
Hmm.
general principle is pretty much starting as early as you can. Um, right now, like me and Ryan just said, like there's a lot of new incoming people into these banks. And so there's a little bit of sort of froth or chaos right now as those people kind of get into desks and join teams. Um, I think that you'll have varying success with networking. Obviously, like in the week that all these banks are doing training and people are getting flown out, it might be difficult. But if you find the right window, it's always a good thing to get in touch. On the MBA side, I will say at a target school, so U Chicago, Wharton, NYU, Columbia, you should not reach out to alumni yet. A lot of times there's a very strong, like solid, structured process for the way that you get in touch with alumni. And if you jump ahead of that, it just kind of shows that you're not really in group. So there, I would recommend that you wait until you've touched base with the banking club. That said, and this goes for both MBA and undergrad, you can start to reach out to warm leads. A warm lead is like, let's say, a friend of a friend, like a family friend, or someone that you already sort of have a connection with who would just like give you a phone call because it's going to probably be a little bit messy. And by that, I mean, you're probably not going to have everything sort of like tight. You're not really going to know what to say, maybe. Um, and so you want someone where there's like this like friendly initial kind of target. For MBA side, for example, when you get onto campus, a lot of times your first sort of coffee chats will be with 2Ys, second years. And that's a very easy kind of environment to get that feedback before you kind of go out into the world. My recommendation is to focus on the sort of technicals and market side, which Ryan talked about. If you have a coach, I would say shoot for networking, like go for it, but odds are you're probably going to screw that up. So on the technical side, uh, first of all, you can start on Offer Goblin. The Goblin 100 is a great resource to kind of start to like ramp up and get up to speed with things. You can read the Wall Street Prep Red book. That's another like sort of ramp up doc. And get into like using the flashcards that we use for Offer Goblin, Goblin mode to kind of go through and see where you already know things in terms of topics and get a feel for what types of questions banks ask. All of our questions there are have been asked in interviews in the past, so you get that kind of feeling. On the other side, I would say start following the market. And the best things to do, in my opinion, for that is whatever is going to be consistent for you. For me, that was podcasts. So I would listen to Bloomberg Intelligence or Bloomberg Technology, one or the other, every day. That podcast is pretty long, but covers earnings calls. They get into technical details. They talk to analysts. They talk to CFOs. That's the type of material that you need to start engaging with. When I start working with candidates, a lot of times they sound like students because they're not listening to actual financial analysts. They're used to listening to kind of each other talk about finance. You really need your information diet to be the same as an actual investment banker if you want to sound like one and you want to get a banking offer. Another good alternative to Bloomberg Intelligence, if you don't have as much time, is Seeking Alpha's Wall Street Breakfast. So you can find other podcasts that are like that, but the core consideration is that it really needs to be sort of a technical industry, like insider finance podcast, and you need to start learning how to sound like that and how to listen to that. So that covers June. June, I think, is like you're kind of getting ahead of it. You're getting the ball rolling early. That's what I did. got going as early as possible, and I would say for that reason I was able to land a Centerview offer. If I was learning technicals when I got to school in September, there's no way that I could have gotten up to speed by the time I needed to do my interviews. So that covers June. Then we have July and August. I would say for July, Ryan, what do you think? That's probably pretty similar to June, right? It's sort of this like provisional, like get ahead phase. Would you kind of bucket those together, or
So,
would you change anything?
so I will say also this, and I do want to add something to the MBA part, right?
Hmm.
Things have gotten so competitive, and I'm thinking of this more from like an international student because I deal with a lot more international students.
Hmm.
Is definitely think, especially if you don't have finance experience, I think this is one of the biggest, I think, misnomers is that people go into MBA thinking they could get any job they want. Right? It's because like, oh, I'm paying $500,000 for my education. And so therefore I should be able to, they almost come across as entitled, as in like, I got into a Booth or
Ah,
Wharton. I was like, okay, because I got into Wharton, I'm the
oof.
greatest thing since sliced bread. And so therefore I should have the job lined up.
Sure.
And like, and like I've seen this. It's like they go to Cornell, a banking school, and they're like, okay, and Cornell likes to like flaunt it in their like recruiting materials.
Ivy League school. Great school, Ryan.
Yeah, so there's like, look, we send so many kids to banking every year, and so people's like, okay, so I'm guaranteed one, right?
Hmm.
No, all right, and then it's like, and this is where I think the MBAs are kind of not fully honest. And I've seen folks as like people come from like HR and they think like, oh, I'm going to become an investment banker just because I got into Cornell Johnson.
Right.
So this is where I'm saying is June, July, August, if you can, and depending on where you're at, if you could get like a pre-MBA investment banking associate job, and I don't care, just network, like especially if you're international where like the recruiting for those is not as structured. Right? And I see this more from like different countries is tap into your network. If you could get
Hmm.
like a boutique investment banking thing to make you at least
Right.
sound like I'm not hiring a complete stranger to
Yeah.
IB, utilize it. That will pay dividends because recruiting has gotten so much more competitive. And I hear a lot of complaints on the other side where MB students come across as entitled, where people think, and then I also hear people complaining about the business school saying, why don't they help us? And I frankly look at these resumes, I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't hire you either, right? I don't care you how
Right.
much money you spent. And so
Right.
seriously think about getting a pre-MBA investment banking associate. But other than that, yes, a lot of
Hmm.
July is going to be very similar to June.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great tip. I would say with the MBA, and you know, you fought a lot to get in, right? And you're probably in a great position if you got into a good school. You're definitely in a good position, but you're starting a new game. You leveled up, but the score is still zero now. You're competing against a new set of people. And so you got to a point where you're sort of on the field, but you still have to win the game. So I would just say, like, yeah, avoid that feeling of entitlement, or even, and that goes also for people who got offers, right? There's no real entitlement in investment banking. Everyone is pretty much replaceable. I shouldn't say everyone, but most people, it's pretty replaceable. Um, so keep fighting. So August and September timeframe, people start to get onto campus. Kind of depends on the school. U Chicago starts pretty late. I think starts like the end of September. But let's talk a little bit about that time frame. So like kind of what's happening as people are sort of getting to school. What should they be focused on? Yeah, potholes.
So are we talking about MBAs or are we talking about undergrads? I'm happy to talk both.
You can do the undergrad, and then I'll layer in the MBA.
So for undergrad, if you're not part of finance clubs, be ready to hit the ground running to recruit those finance clubs, right? And so this is where I'm saying use the summer to become polished, right?
Hmm.
whether in your story, your resume, just make it easy to say yes. So I know we talked about the whole beginning in terms of like whether at banks, how much should you prepare is don't think of like sure you're trying to like yes in one sense you're thinking about passing a test, but I think the difference between reality and school is I like to use sort of the saying is in school you're given the lesson first and the test after. In life you're given the test first and then the lesson after.
I love that.
Treat yeah, treat everything as if like benchmark yourself, hold yourself to a higher standard of excellence. Don't necessarily say, okay, I'm just doing the bare minimum to just get into a club. Get yourself in a good habit in a standard of excellence where getting into a club is almost a no-brainer and you're aiming for
Right.
better things. And so, yeah, if you're getting back to school is get into those clubs because those clubs will also help their kids get into the banks. They also have alum, and those alum also help out with recruiting. You're just going to save yourself so much heartache and make your life so much more efficient if you could get into those clubs.
Yeah, I agree. I think that August, September time, I mean, for MBAs, the clubs are not gated, at least in my experience. So at U Chicago, for example, you don't have to like apply to IBG, the investment banking group. You're pretty much already in, and there's one club. So it's almost like a government-run monopoly, you think of it as. But when it comes to undergrads, there's a lot of these little boutiques. So like at U Chicago, there's a bunch of different ones. There's like the banking club, there's blue chips, there's promontory research, there's like so there's all these different little clubs, and they all have like slightly different relationships and purposes. Um, and you have to apply and get into them for the most part. So there's like this additional layer of recruitment. The timeline, I don't know if the timeline is, you know, starting your sophomore year. A lot of times it's like earlier than that, I believe. But usually kind of that August and September timeframe of like, let's say your second year or your first year MBA, you're really leaning on those clubs heavily. That's probably the most engaged that you'll be with any kind of banking or finance club in your academic career, unless you're kind of run like later on running it. The other thing I will add in, and this is like a tricky one. I think you need a lot of people need a makeover. So I could not, when I was going into banking, I did not look like this. You can't have a beard. Simple as that. It doesn't really matter what, it doesn't matter like what or why you have it. And a lot of people complained about this. There was a lot of sort of like, oh, it's cultural and all these things. It's like, well, ultimately, there's a rule that you don't have a beard, and they'll recognize that you're not following that rule. It'll simply just not reflect well on you. So you'll need to be clean shaven. You'll want to have a proper haircut. I think for men, that means sort of like essentially comb to the side. I think middle part if you really want to, but like it needs to be like a actual well done haircut. It can't be like again like me. I don't look like someone that you'd want to hire at an investment bank because you know my hair is all messy. You want a very neat and sort of formal appearance. Um, the other thing is, and for women, obviously the same things apply. I think like simple hairstyles. You don't want to have like dyed hair. You don't want to have anything that sort of jumps out in any way. Everything needs to be very like neutral. The other thing, and this is like, I feel like this is like a non-starter a lot of times, is like you need a suit or outfit that fits you. So many people I see, and I talk to candidates, like I talk to incoming MBAs and all these other people, and it's like when you see someone in a suit that doesn't fit them, it's so hard for them to overcome that deficit. And it's not, you know, I understand that that's something that costs money. This entire process costs a ton of money. You need to invest the money into presenting yourself well because you kind of only have one shot at this. So I would say find a way to get a suit. If you need to buy a used suit, you can figure out if you're not resourceful enough to get a properly fitting suit for recruitment, then you're probably not going to make it anyway. But I would highly recommend that you get a very simple, let's say a blue suit with a couple of ties, like maybe two ties and a handful of white shirts, decent shoes, uh, like whatever black leather shoes. It doesn't need to be anything special. Regular socks. You don't need a very expensive watch. You don't need any of that sort of thing. But try to dress up like an investment banker. Like just try to do that. Um, don't get a modern cut suit where your pant leg is cut higher and it's like very tight. Like try to just look traditional, unnoticeable, polished, all that. You'll have to figure that out. So that's sort of the August and September timeline. And a lot of banks are going to get you rolling immediately. So for MBAs, like they wanted to talk to us the moment we stepped on campus, and the schools kind of pushed them back a few weeks. But like as soon as we got to campus, it's like we met with IBG. They're kind of going through our resume. They're like kind of gathering us together, and everyone's kind of telling us like how this is going to work, because the banks come pretty much as soon as they're allowed to. And so you're going to have to kind of like get your makeover with your resume and your physical makeover and all these other things, getting all of that together as the conversations will start. For target schools, both MBA and undergrad, the banks will come to you. They'll have info sessions and sort of events where they'll like engage with you to some degree. For non-target, you'll mostly need to go and reach out to those people. It's not impossible to do that. I think a lot of non-target people get discouraged by that concept, but they absolutely have spots for you. It's absolutely possible to do it. It's just a different system of doing it. It's decentralized. So yeah, I would say that August, September is like the makeover phase. It's like the initial like first date kind of phase. Your second years or your older upperclassmen are going to really be kind of investing in you and getting you rolling. And that's, I would say, the theme of August or September. So now let's talk about like October, and I don't know if you want to bucket that with November, but like what happens in that sort of after the first wave of like info sessions and things like that? What's the next thing? What happens next?
So this is where October and November, this is crazy networking season for undergrads, and similar with MBAs, right? You're doing your coffee chats, right? Now, there's a few ways you could approach it, right? If you had prepared in the summer, a lot of this will be easy for you, right? But I would say October and November at the undergrad level, it's going to be hectic. It's not as, I mean, it's going to be hectic at the MBA level too, but at the undergrad is they're structured and unstructured, right? Structured in the sense that the banks come to you for their info sessions. Unstructured in the sense in that you're not guaranteed a coffee chat. Whereas at the MBA level, you're pretty much, as long as you cross your T's and dot your I's and you don't like come across as like a hobo, like you're going to be fine. Whereas at the undergrad level, it's kind of tough. Like those info sessions, man, they're packed through the door. So like this is where the clubs are really helpful. If someone could give you a soft referral and just be like, yo, you got to talk to this guy, right? It's like there's a lot of soft referrals at the undergrad level too. And it will help cut you to the front of the line, because those analysts, man, they're getting work to the bone. Like they may or may not respond to you. Of course, you have to be polite. You have to send your resume. You want to try to send an email that's, direct to the point, yet also shows that you care and did your homework. But it's not guaranteed. So this is why start early. It's start early, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like the October November theme is like still is like deeper is like deep strong networking, because we always, I think whenever we talk about this in the podcast, I always try to bring up the funnel, right? So the top of the funnel is like all of the people that you're going to be able to talk to. And like we mentioned, for target, non-target, it's different. But a lot of times you can get like initial conversations going. So the first time you talk to someone, let's say, that's sort of like the top of the funnel. By October and November, you're kind of getting into the middle of the funnel, where you may have talked to multiple people at the same bank. you may have also talked to the same person more than once. And so you're really starting to like, not only are you sort of deciding like which banks you actually want to go to, but they're also kind of deciding that as well. So they have their funnel, you have your funnel, and it starts to kind of like tighten down in October and November. For MBAs, and actually it's the same for undergrads, there's like regional recruiting. So the regular recruiting, when people talk about recruiting and recruiting timeline, they're generally talking about New York, which is like into like January, February when final offers go. Regional recruiting is basically everywhere else. So there's Chicago, there's West Coast, which is like kind of split between San Francisco and LA. There's Texas, which I think is mostly Houston. There's even like, Charlotte, there's some other places that have banking recruitment. The timelines of all of those are a little bit different, but typically regional is like earlier. So there were people that come November already had Houston offers. I think we did our first round interviews for West Coast during Thanksgiving break, for example. And we had our final offers like by the week after that or 2 weeks after that. So like early December. So for some people, like it's going to happen really, really fast. And again, that's why Ryan is always saying, and what we'll always say is to start early. Um, I'll add something else to that. That you want to be kind of at this point, like you want to be kind of building relationships. I think there's like this, like the process is like very brutal, and there's like this, especially I think the undergrads, it's like a horde of zombies that like flood an info session, and like the bankers are just like chopping their way through this crowd, and like you're gonna have to like kind of become a person to them. You're gonna have to become a human being. They're gonna need to like identify you as a human being, and like part of that, especially in this phase, is like you need to sort of be like personal to them in a way. They need to kind of know who you are. And so those conversations that you have ideally start to kind of like circle back to things that you've talked about before. You're building some rapport, and you're kind of developing that actual connection. So that's sort of into the like October, November timeframe. Another thing I'll add in is like a lot of times they'll people will tell you that you can study for your technicals in 2 weeks, and people will be starting those in this time frame, and they'll be absolutely cooked. Um, you may be able to pull that off. People pull it off all the time, I guess. But if you're trying to do that and you're trying to network well, you're probably not going to do as well as you can. So again, do your technicals early, get on Offer Goblin early, know what the banks are going to ask in like June now. And then when you're in this phase, it'll just everything will be much lighter. So then we get into December, and maybe we kind of can bucket December and January. What do you think? Maybe December is on its own. What's going on in December?
So this is where, you need to get your applications in, right? It depends on the bank. And I'm talking about this from the undergrad level, right? This is where things get, because some firms will have like sort of like early insights program where they might bring you in for like a 2-3 day event where you get to see their banks. I know like Perella Weinberg, I think has one, and then Houlihan Lokey has one, and then some folks might just interview right then and there and get their offer like at one of those early insights program. Early January is basically where all the interviews go full blown, and depends on timing. It might go into, and I'm talking mainly for bulges, and it might go into like February, right?
Yeah.
So, but I've seen a wide dispersion of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it starts to get like December, January, it's like fair game that you could have a super day.
Yeah.
So you need to be like super day ready by then. For for target school MBA, you do treks. So West Coast banking, we had probably 10 of us. We went and did a trek. We went all to San Francisco. We visited all the banks there. And that was like another kind of touch point. The New York group goes in early January. They meet with a bunch of banks. Some of that is invite only. That's another thing, is that throughout the timeline, there's some invite only events. So you'll sort of know where you stand with different banks. The other thing that I want to add about this timeline and your own funnel is that a lot of people come in with like, oh, I want to work at Evercore, but they never talk to anyone from Evercore. They just have that sense based on like what they sort of know about it. But as they go through this process, they realize kind of where they fit better. So I knew someone that was like hell bent on going to Evercore, but hadn't spoken to anyone there. She ended up at B of A and was very happy. She works there full time now, and that was kind of a great path. As you go in this process, you're going to see who you naturally resonate with. There's some groups, there's some people that you're going to meet, and you're going to be like, wow, I would not want to work with these people, despite the fact that maybe that bank was number one on your list, or it's number one on some other list, number one most prestigious bank, number one deal flow, whatever. But you go and talk to people and you're like, these people are horrible. I don't resonate with them at all. And then you may go somewhere else and talk to somebody, and you might find like this other team is like, these people are awesome. Like I could totally imagine chatting with this person all day. So you do need to have a funnel on your own, because if you force it, right? There's something I read that was like, the market will always figure out that you forced something. So you never really want to force things. You want to find the place where you fit, because that's where you're going to have the best outcome. Most likely to get a return offer, most likely to perform well. We talked about this, I think, in the first episode, but about how Jamie Dimon ended up going to American Express because there was a mentor there that he really resonated well with. And obviously, as you know, his career has gone extremely well on that basis. So I think you need to consider your own funnel in this process, and especially come December and January. The goal isn't to have like the most number of offers. You need one offer. You can only accept one offer. Ideally, you're sort of in multiple processes to the degree that it helps you sort of statistically, but at some point having like 10 offers or doing like 10 super days is actually going to be a detriment to all of them rather than any kind of an advantage. So that's another kind of detail that I think you should have an eye on at that point in the game.
Yeah.
Are you answering emails, Ryan?
I am not answering emails. I'm like,
I see
I'm
like,
still long days. My days are still. I was
yeah.
thinking about I do also want to talk about the fact that there is a lot more to banking preparation in terms of, and people, especially at the MBA level, underestimate this, and this might be a bit more relevant, is if you're coming in at an MBA level, you're a bit more, you're not that young anymore, for lack of a better word. Right. It's like, and you're probably not in the healthiest shape as you were when you're 21, 22. And I tell people this, and I tell people not to get offended, is if you have those time, like August, if like June, July, August, use that time to also just get into healthy habits, get into shape. And because like, I'm sure you know this too, Mike, is like, people at the MBA level, they either sleep really late because they're partying hard, or they're drinking. And then like once I see and nobody tells you this, but I've seen so many people at the MBA level at associates, is one of the reasons they leave banking or they cannot survive after summer is because their health gives out. And it's like, I've already seen people 1 or 2 years on the job where say, look, I'm taking medical leave. And like, yeah, sure. If you're MBA, you're late 20s, early 30s, and you think you're still Superman, like,
Right.
use that time to, I mean, it's not only a good career choice, but also it's a it's just a good investment in general in your life. And the people who
Hmm.
do the best in banking are the ones who have it really structured. And it goes to the whole thing, right? You tell them to like dress well. And that image also really helps a lot too. People will have biases in terms of does this person look like a banker, right?
Right.
And so the
Yeah.
whole suit, having a well-tailored suit and everything,
Hmm.
also it helps if you don't look like you're going to keel over, right? That's also so
Yeah.
that's my hot take
That's
for today.
that that is great advice. Yeah. I agree. I actually went through the whole process. I don't drink, but I did not miss a workout. I work out 6 days a week doing
Yeah.
triathlon stuff, and I landed a Centerview offer. I think the tricks are to, and I didn't miss a class either.
Yeah.
I think one trick is to live very close to campus. A lot of people,
Yeah.
especially again, MBAs don't do that, but like try to find efficiencies that you can bake into this, especially your first year. And we could probably talk more about those sorts of tips. I think we've done a good job here of laying out the timeline of kind of why commitment matters. And I think with that, we'll pretty much wrap it up. You can go to the link in our bio if you want to schedule time with either me or Ryan.
Yeah.
You can check out Offer Goblin, get on the Goblin 100. That's 100 questions to ramp you up to being ready to do Goblin mode, which is our algorithmic mode. Um, and we'll see you next week.
Take care. Good luck with recruiting.